All right, welcome into another Front Office Sports webinar. Super excited to have everyone joining us here for the next 45 minutes to an hour. We have a great panel lined up for you. For those of you who don't know, I'm Adam, the CEO of Front Office Sports, and I'd love to welcome you into how sports media companies are monetizing branded content, presented by our friends at Conviva. We have a great lineup. Obviously, as you guys can see, an all-star panel. You'll see in the chat a couple of instructions. So if you want to jump in and ask a question, please feel free to use the questions tab. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible as we go throughout the next 45 minutes to an hour. And then also, please feel free to say hello. Would love to chat with you in the chat and want to make sure everyone here is represented and has an opportunity to connect with each other as well, both internally and externally after the event. But really got a ton ahead of us, so I want to get right into it. We have a ton to speak about from a branded content perspective, specifically when it comes to the biggest companies in sports media. And today's panel, I'll go quickly to introduce them and we'll jump right in. Joining us from Conviva is Nick Cicero, their VP of Strategy. Joining us from Overtime is Rich Kalachi, the CRO. Joining us from Learfield is Zach Damon, Director of Digital and Social Activation for Learfield IMG College. Joining us from the Walt Disney Company is Christina Carey Dunleavy, VP of Commercial Operations, Disney Creative Works and Multicultural. And then joining us from Barstool Sports is Deirdre Lester, the Chief Revenue Officer. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. And I kind of want to open it up with a broad question for everyone, specifically on the publisher side of things. Maybe I'll just kick it to Rich to start us off. But when it comes to branded content, how does it fit into the overall marketing and revenue strategy of Overtime?
Hey, thanks, Adam, and nice to see everybody. Thanks for making time, and hope everybody has a wonderful Independence Day. It's interesting when I hear branded content, I think back about brands and or publishers that were trying to do something that was uncomfortable to them, that was trying to fill a need that was being underserved by either television or some combination of digital and television. And you fast forward to 2021, and I no longer think about it as just branded content. I think about everything we do at Overtime. Has got to be worthy of review, not because it has paid support, but because it has an organic engagement. And so really it's more of a positioning towards content consumption broadly and allowing for brands to have enough breathing room to come participate in the conversation and engage with our community. And have to just do that in an authentic way. And I know people throw around that word authentically quite often, and it's not wrong. It's just at the end of the day, we're not going to do something just to make money. We're only going to do things in service of the community and in service of the conversation. And I think it's natural because we only live and we only survive on social media, that the social content that we distribute includes brands an opportunity to have those conversations and engage our community and do so in a way that's really meaningful. And ultimately for us, our metric for success is never really views. It's always about engagement. And the ability to create another conversation underneath the branded content conversation is really what drives the overall value to us. So can we make money doing it? Sure. It's not really the driving force. The driving force is more about engaging our community with the brands that support Overtime.
Awesome. Appreciate it. I'll toss that to you, Deidre, on your side and on Barstool side of things.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Rich said. In fact, I think it was Rich who kind of gave me this analogy couple of years back that there was a time where doing branded content sounded really sexy. It was very high lift, very expensive. And we talked about that tug of war between the brands and the creator or / publisher that were doing the content. At the time I was at a different company and I was representing a lot of YouTube creators like Dude Perfect and others. And that friction that it took to get the project actually launched and live was so taxing that I think, Rich, you likened it to planning a trip to Vegas. It's really fun on the way there. You go and you party all night, and then you on your way home say you're never going back again, and then 3 months later you're planning your next visit. That is what branded content was like for a while. I think now it's evolved where brands have gotten more comfortable with whether it be a publisher, whether it be an influencer or a celebrity, whoever they are leaning on to come up with the creative idea, to come up with the actual content itself. The brands are more bought in on letting the creative do the work, letting the creative tell the story, letting go a little bit of their kind of brand identity a little bit and letting the creator run with it. And I think that's probably still difficult in a lot of scenarios. So it's never really that easy, but you really have to make sure from the brand's perspective that you're comfortable with who you're partnering with, and you're going to let them be stewards of your brand in a way that's authentic to them and to their audience. Because if you're dictating that, it won't resonate. The talent won't get behind it in the way that it needs to really drive that engagement. And I think it has become a very big part of our business. One of the series we launched yesterday, we're currently in distribution on a show called Barstool versus America, and it's sponsored by High Noon Hard Seltzer, and they literally just give us the keys, right? They say, like, you guys run with it, you do what you're going to do. We produced what I call reality parody series, and it's being distributed right now on our channel. But the production of it all, like, they're just very trusting of us. They've been a long-time partner, so they're the ideal partner to do something of that magnitude with. That's kind of part of it, is like finding a suitable partner to create the content with. Otherwise, again, it's just going to be really difficult, the whole process, and ultimately not have the result that both want, the fans want, and ultimately the brand wants.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that Deirdre and Rich, you guys have, and more of digital first brands, right? Your audience has always lived on the internet or on social channels in a lot of ways, and you're kind of using branded content in different ways to help diversify revenue. I'm curious, Christina and Zach, you guys don't just deal with digital only. At Learfield, Zach, you guys have different partnerships all across the board, both online and offline. And then Christina, obviously at Disney, you guys have a number of different touch points. So I'm curious to hear, how in your guys' companies that are positioned a little bit differently, do you guys look at branded content?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go. I think what Deirdre said and Rich said, a lot of it still translates greatly when you think about the clients and that trust in order to create really meaningful content that resonates and is authentic. So what we're doing often is educating our clients that usually look to us for TV ideas to really showcase that we can be equally as effective in digital and social, which will unlock younger audience. So we see social as a great complement to our linear broadcast, where we can reach fans with engaging content on the device and platform younger audiences are using. And we no longer have to be reliant on the live sports window, right? Or specific tune in for, say, Sports Center. We can really connect brands with our fans when it makes sense at scale and effective targeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, from the Learfield side, we haven't always historically been a digital first company. We have a ton of valuable traditional assets, whether that's in stadium or in radio broadcast, that's really driven revenue for our company. This past year, and I'm sure this is the case for all of us on the call, the pandemic changed a lot of things. So really, as part of the evolution of our company, a lot of those traditional assets, unfortunately, were taken away from us as games were being canceled and everything that happened with COVID-19. So we're really looking at positioning ourselves into a digital first company and a publishing company. So that's been a really good shift for us. Honestly, it's something that was kind of forced upon us, but it's definitely where leadership at our company wants us to go. And I did want to hit on something Deirdre had mentioned on the authentic messaging. So for those of you who don't know, we're running branded content through our 180 plus school partners across the country. So we're publishing this content through official athletics channels, official sports channels, et cetera. So being authentic to that brand is first and foremost the most important thing for us. We want to appear authentic to the fan base. We want this to look like any other content that that a top tier school might be pushing out. And then figuring out what that fit is in terms of a true partnership with the actual content that's going out. So those are the things that we look at every time we're positioning social as a revenue driver. Definitely something we've seen success with.
Awesome. Love that. So I guess when it comes to one of the things and one of the big questions that I would love to address here with the broader group is, we've talked about the evolution of branded content, going to Vegas, everything like that. Best practices for selling branded content. Obviously, I think it's changed a lot, and kind of how you're packaging it, how you're approaching it. Would love to talk through the strategy, what works, what doesn't, what you guys have seen work maybe more in the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, what you're leaning into. So, I'll kick it back to you, Rich, on your side of things. So obviously you have a pretty unique portfolio of brands in that focus area. But for you guys, when it comes to branded content, best practices for selling it and what has worked and what hasn't really, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think, not to be self-serving to our sponsor here, but I think one of the huge benefits that's come forward as of late is what a service like Conviva provides in a sponsored content or branded content model, because absent that real-time data that basically aggregates all the data that we need to basically better educate our clients and our relationships with the opportunity around the branded content opportunity, it runs a risk of falling flat, and that has to be done in real time. So being able to ingest all the post data, taking a look at viewer conversion, taking a look at regional aspects of how the content was consumed, and looking at these engagement rates, across all 6 platforms. If you're not doing that in real time, you're missing a huge opportunity, because I think that's where the value proposition is to the clients, is by providing them, not only was this a great idea, and not only were we able to harness the energy of a community like Overtime, but in the course of that conversation, we're able to bring back insights and data back to the client to make them better positioned to come back to you and say, hey, Rocket Mortgage, we love what you do with Draft House and with Najee Harris and Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase. We would love to do the same thing with the NBA, or we'd love to do something later down the road. And I think Deirdre may have a different point of view than I do, but I really feel like 3 or 4 years ago, branded content was something people felt an obligation to do, and they had an obligation mindset, which is, our commercials are falling flat, television viewer ratings are down, we have to do branded content to inject energy around our brand. And now it's not about that. It's no longer an obligation mindset. It's now an opportunity mindset, which is, we now have the opportunity to engage these young audiences. We have the opportunity to harness this energy around a community like Overtime. And we've got the ability to leverage these 6 social platforms by virtue of Conviva and the data they present, in order to basically synthesize the opportunity for everybody that's in the decision-making tree. Because without that, you're really just doing kind of a marketing one-off. And I don't know every CMO, but most CMOs I know are not interested in doing one-offs. They want to do something that's sustainable.
Yeah, I think, to stick with my Vegas analogy, back in the day, what was frustrating about branded content is you worked very hard to win that business. You brainstormed, you took your best idea, you dressed it up, you put it in a deck, you brought it with you brought your best team, and you went in and pitched and sold an idea, and then you did all the work, and then, to Rich's point, it was like a one-off, and then the brand is like, that was great, thank you. I'm going to go to Vegas again, but I'm going to do it with your competitor because I want a different idea now. So one of the things that I've really tried to instill in my sales people and the team that around them that come up with the ideas is to come up with repeatable ideas, something that once the brand has done it with us, they're going to want the version 2.0 or this, season 2 of it all. They're not going to want us to take it to someone else and repackage it and sell it to a different brand. They're going to want it to be something that they can own and sustain, and that their brand can be synonymous with. And so episodic things that have seasons, things that can come back, year over year around a tent pole or an event. That could be anything from the Golden Globes to the Super Bowl. We do a lot of surrounding big cultural moments. That to me is more sustainable for us. Instead of having to always reinvent the next idea, the idea that no one else has thought of, because every idea has been done before. But also for the brand, the value in being able to attach themselves to something that they can do year over year, quarter over quarter, whatever the right cadence is, and really continue to get more value out of it. And then the other thing is making sure the idea allows the brand to enhance the content. So, no one is interested in a branded content series where it's just a logo slap and maybe some product placement. They really want to find a way into the content in a meaningful way that is memorable, and that, in an ideal world, fans are talking about. So One of the things that I love about the internet and our fans is that they're very vocal. You know, I mentioned the series that we're doing right now. Like, there's a lot of chatter about it. It's a reality series, so there's chatter about the characters and the drama that's ensuing. There's also a lot of like comments about the sponsor and how people are literally leaning back and enjoying a high noon while they watch the high noon sponsored series that we've put out there, Barstool vs. America. So like, we're trying to find ways to have the brand be integrated really authentically, that it is in a way that the fans appreciate their presence there.
If you talk about high noon again, we're gonna have to go get a high noon.
They are delicious, I have to say.
Making us thirsty.
I first saw them on Dave's on your Barstool streams, yeah, and then now they're everywhere. So
I'm not ashamed of plugging myself.
And actually, you know, this is something we had talked about. I mean, Christina, when we had our pre-call the other day, right? You know, the other side of that, as you know, Rich mentioned, is that the opportunity mindset. There's also this really weird make good mindset, where oftentimes you'd have sales teams going in and selling quote unquote digital or selling linear and kind of throwing in social branded content kind of as an afterthought, or hey, we need to make up for something, so let's throw a campaign inside of there, instead of really looking at it as the opportunity. And you know, in your guys' case, you have that whole ability to go and reach that incremental audience that you're not probably going to reach through, you know, some of the other places that you might quote unquote sell ads to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I think how we approached branded content before was very different. A lot of it was, you know, yes, let's add that in, or we have a TV commercial, can you post this organically? And it's very much taking a step back and what is the best creative approach that's going to hit on the brief and those objectives, while tapping into a larger internal resource, whether that's CreativeWorks, which is our internal branded entertainment studio and consultancy, or our editorial team, right? What's best going to resonate? What's going to work for this audience? And really being able to build something that's going to be meaningful and getting that into the conversation much sooner. Like, a lot of times it had been at the end, right? And then it's, you know, you're just figuring out what to do and it's not being measured properly. And so now it's having that part of the conversation from the beginning and showing how the full campaign can work collectively together.
So maybe, Adam, that's a good transition point into talking about who comes up with these ideas for branded content. I think that there are obviously organizations large and small. You think about the minor league baseball teams that come up with those crazy promos, and all the way up to what you guys are doing. And, you know, Deirdre and Rich, you guys are even inventing new types of surfaces to be able to go and monetize. So who comes up with these ideas within your organization, both from, you know, pitching to the advertiser, but then ultimately bringing it to execution? Anybody can jump in.
I mean, as a general rule at Overtime, we want to lead with ideas. Although I shared Deirdre's point of view that, you know, ideas kind of come free and easy, and not every idea is executable. So what it really comes down to is, you know, for a community like Overtime to be informed by the way our fans and followers are talking about things that are important to them, making sure that we bring that perspective to the table, maybe bring the mustard seed of an idea, but really lean on the creative agency and the clients to develop that idea more fully. Most recently, we had a really compelling concept targeted towards back to school, specifically towards young adults between the ages of 18 and 24. And Dick's Sporting Goods, who's now moving swiftly into the leisure apparel space and athletic apparel space, looked to us for two things. First and foremost, a consultancy around TikTok, because they like others see the largest following of any sports brand on TikTok, which is Overtime with almost 18 million followers. They knew we knew how to curate content, knew how to build an audience. But now we had to curate content and build an audience for Dick's Sporting Goods specifically, which is a totally different challenge. So in that case, our appetite for risk may be inherently different than Dick's Sporting Goods' appetite for risk. But ultimately, through their guidance, through conversations with the CMO, in partnership with their agency VML, we ended up launching a platform called the Show Out Draft, which features 8 influencers in a contest that eventually may lead to the opportunity to be part of a national television campaign for Dick's Sporting Goods. So those are things where I think you each bring your own values and your own experience, and your own best learnings to the table, and help build and work together. Because if I'm just trying to tell you how great my idea is, I never listen. And the real key is coming to the table with an idea that you can build upon, either through your own experience or through your client's expectations. And what Christina called out about in the brief, you get a lot of information from a brief, but ultimately it's the in real life, in-person conversation and seeing facial reactions to these ideas and building upon it that's actually going to get you to the solid ground. Because ultimately, we all know on this call and everyone who's joining remotely, that if you try to force feed an idea, even to an engaged community like Overtime's 50 million followers and 125 million users across the web, it's going to fall flat, and that's not a good outcome for us as a brand or for the brand that's being part of as a sponsor.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit there. I think generally it's more about being proactive rather than reactive, and I think historically branded content has been a reactive product, and it's more so taking existing content and maybe doing a logo slap, which the days of logo slaps are done and over with. So something that Learfield IMG College has been focusing on is being more of a publisher, more of a proactive publisher. We recently added a head of content who's really focusing on larger, more produced type of video content across the country. We also have a team internally called Social Plus. We are working on expanding that team, and we'll soon, hopefully by the end of the year, be at all Power Five schools. And what those folks do is they're content creators on the ground. So they're working directly with the athletic departments at the universities, attending games, capturing content, and coming up with those ideas that are ultimately going to get sold. And those are things that we've seen some really good success with, and having that authentic brand, that authentic school brand in the content really kind of sells itself to the sponsors as they're looking to really integrate themselves and be a true partner. So those are a few things, and again, it's less of a reactive shift for us, and more of a proactively going to produce and find that content that we think has revenue potential.
Awesome. And they just mentioned they're having a hard time hearing you, Zach. So maybe just yell if you need to a little bit more. Yell like you're in Vegas or something. We'll just keep the Vegas trend going.
The Vegas theme.
It's a Vegas theme. I guess, Deirdre, when we're talking about branded content, I think the one thing that Barstool does well, and I think Overtime is doing this well too, is like you're taking branded content and you're going from branded content to products. And then obviously like with like Pink Whitney and everything like that, can you talk us through what that looks like from a partner standpoint, getting them in on branded content, getting them to believe in that, and then figuring out a way in which, like, I think Owens, you guys launched a co-branded product with. Are you guys considering that branded content? Like, what is that definition in terms of like the funnel and pipeline when you're taking your partners through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer the other question that was going on, because I did want to address, like, for us, we're very much personality led as a company, as a business, and as a content team. And so for me, the ideas should come from the creators themselves. We work hard to try to get ideas from them in advance, so that when we're pitching ideas off the cuff or proactively or reacting to a brief, we already know that a certain talent has this idea that they've been like holding on to and wanting to execute for the longest time. If we don't have that idea to react to a particular brand, we get them involved. So I think one of the nice things that I really loved about Barstool when I came here, again, having come from a place where we were a collective of a lot of different really talented influencers, but they were all over the world, and we didn't really have access to them readily. And there was also like layer and layer of agents in between, that we're all looking for what's my little cut of this deal. And it's like, it's death by 1,000 cuts to get a deal done. Here it's just like walk downstairs, ask Big Cat and PFT if they're in on an idea. And a lot of times they'll say, we love it, but we would do it this way. And they give you 10 more ideas. And when you go back to the brand, you are like, we are all in on you and what your brand is all about. They're sponsored by Molson Coors, and our guys have like ignited a social movement around Coors Light and the mountains are blue, and bringing back some of their old commercial ideas, but bringing them into a social environment. So I think it's about, getting the creatives in the in the conversation as early as possible. We also have a Barstool creative team, a branded content team that are constantly brainstorming ideas and then kind of walking those around all the time to make sure that like they're bouncing those ideas off different talent and kind of writing those up and sharing that with us so that we have those in our back pocket for the right opportunity when it comes along. In terms of the partnership you mentioned, Pink Whitney and Owens, in recent years, we've really been able to take some of our more invested partners and take the partnership to the next level, where we're taking a hybrid of a sponsorship model into now a co-branded product and or licensing business. That's been a huge boon to our business and also to those partners' business. And we're, in that case, we have skin in the game in a way that in the world of sponsorship and advertising, publishers, TV networks never did. We weren't as in, you want to sell your media spots and dots, or now you're like integrating brands into your content in a more meaningful way. But at the end of the day, like how many cars they move off the lot isn't necessarily your problem. We have entered into a few partnerships where we know what the outcomes are and what's driving sales and what's driving, people to walk into a grocery store and pick up, a case of High Noon, a case of Pink Whitney, which people buy by the case, believe it or not. And then that only, fuels the ideation of the talent that are involved in that. So in the case of Pink Whitney, you have Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette and the rest of the Spit and Chicklets group constantly coming to us with like, hey, what if we did this to grow Pink Whitney? So I think, the growth of that brand is really fueled by the talent that are invested and by Barstool being invested in the overall outcome of the business proposition there.
That's really interesting. All right. I think for the last piece of the day, we can do a live answer. And I think talking about measurement, right? So we're creating all of this really great content, right? But brands want to know, what am I getting out of this? What's the value? So I'd love to hear from Zach, Deirdre, and Rich maybe on how you guys think about measurement internally and what are the types of metrics that are important for your advertisers when they're looking at a successful partnership.
Zach, we can't hear you at all, so maybe no headphones. or Rich, you want to jump in while Zach figures out his audio?
I'll give Zach a second here because he was on a roll.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep. Go ahead, Zach. Take the mic.
Perfect. Okay. So I think, moving back to the ideation process and how we're measuring ourselves for success or how we're measuring partner success, we're really trying to hone in on consistency across the board when it comes to KPIs and calls to action. I think a lot of times in digital in general, but primarily in social, is we get into a habit of trying to do too much, whether it's reaching a large audience, having a high video view rate, having a high click-through rate, having a high engagement rate. Like everybody wants everything all at once. We try to take an approach of really narrowing it into what's your main KPI, what's your main barometer to success to this campaign, and then we'll tailor everything around that one piece. You get into a point where you're the master of none. If you try to do everything across the board. So that's first kind of how when we're putting together campaigns, when we're getting ready to activate something, that's really where we're starting off. And then in terms of how we're measuring those KPIs, again, measuring our barometers of success based on what that main KPI is, what that main call to action is for our partner, but really leveraging, the Conviva tool. We use it every day. And I mentioned, we work with over 180 schools across the country. There's a ton of content being published every day that our team is tasked with tracking. So having everything cohesive in one spot where we can measure organic and paid together is a huge asset to us. And then we'll run a lot of campaigns that are, year-long types of content that are running across, sometimes 20, 30 different schools. So the ability to, proactively track those and bring them into one platform that we can then come back and measure is a huge asset. And then like on the things that we're tracking internally, part of our job is to go back to the client and show them their ROI based on the metrics that we're able to pull. So something that our team does proactively is we're keeping updated benchmarks that we keep track of and update monthly across the board, and we essentially track everything. So when we're talking about a video view campaign, we're tracking not only those 3-second video views, but percentage of video watched and overall, watches to completion. And those are things that we can go back to the client and really, tailor that post-campaign report where we can dig into showing where they're maybe over-indexing against content, published through that account, or broken down by industry or broken down by sports conference. So those are all things that we're keeping into consideration when we're talking about not only reporting on those things, but then going back to the client and pointing out, here's your true ROI of the assets that you purchased.
Yeah, I would build off that a bit. Just not different from Barstool or different from Disney. Overtime is first and foremost a brand, and we're caretakers of that brand and we defend it fiercely. But in order to make it really work, when we produce content, whether it's branded content, sponsored content, or just stuff we're doing because it's fun and cool, we're highly dependent on the dashboards that are provided to us by YouTube and Snapchat in order to make sure that our content experience is progressing and is working in a fundamental way. So it'd be a miss on our side if we thought about all of our collection of advertisers and brands who support Overtime as a business didn't have access to the similar types of reporting in real time. It's a really simple statement, but we just think better data leads to bigger relationships. And as Deirdre mentioned, like, our goal is not to do something one time with a brand. Our goal is to do things multiple times throughout a course of a calendar year or a business relationship. In order to do that, you have to have really, really rich campaign tracking data on a wide variety of posts, and it has to be a view you can provide across all 6 platforms. And the benefit to us as a small company at a venture-backed stage is that with a very small and skilled team, we're able to deliver high-value output directly to the agency or directly to the client in real time in a PDF format that aggregates all the data that we're dependent upon to make sure the campaign is working, independent of the post type. And like I mentioned earlier, whether that's by the state that the viewer resides in, or whether the viewer conversion rate was moving up or trending down, whatever those metrics are, having visibility and delivering that visualization back to the client just creates a richer relationship and a deeper relationship with those clients. And so it's something that's really helpful to us.
Yeah, I think the biggest pain point in media today is all these different platforms. We run over 700 different social accounts at Barstool across all the platforms. Each one, lives on each platform. So if we launch a campaign, it may run across not only the Barstool main channels, but also a host of other channels that we deem appropriate for distribution of the content. Pulling that manually and hearing you guys using that word real time, that's the biggest problem that you can solve for us as a brand and also our brand partners. So I think Conviva does a nice job of that, and I think that's just almost an impossible task when you try to do it at scale. You talk about a business as big as ours where we have hundreds of different advertisers, to be able to get access to that stuff in real time, it's literally not something that a single person or a single ops team can handle. And it's a huge pain point, I think, for folks. So I think measurement is key. The other thing that is unique to us from a measurement standpoint, and I'm not sure we have a turnkey measurement solution, maybe Conviva will call me afterwards and tell me they can solve this, is social listening. We have so much social engagement from a UGC perspective. Our fans talk back to us. They kind of show us that they love the brands that support us. They do this for Barstool and all of our sub-franchises. They buy our merch. They wear our brands. They love to celebrate it. They literally fly our flag. They fly or call her daddy flag. They call the Saturdays are for the boys flag. It's in every dorm room in America. And they do that for our brand partners too. And it's something we always think about when we're coming up with the ideas. what's the anthem that we're creating for this brand? How do we get Viva la Stool is one of our taglines. How do we get everybody tweeting Viva la Dunkin' in support of Dunkin' Donuts? So like those are the types of things that we're trying to ignite in social media, and it works in a lot of the cases, and measuring that and delivering that back to our partners so they see that level of engagement from our fans. So again, they want to continue to come back and partner with us on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
And then one of the questions I see in here is like, how do like a new brand and working with sports media company on a limited budget? I'd say like look for the brands that have organic distribution, organic engagement. I think Rich touched on it a little bit earlier, but like, again, anyone can come up with a branded content idea. A lot of people have great ideas. And then there's a lot of people that can actually go execute and produce them. But to be able to distribute them in an organic way versus to go put it on a channel and then pay for the audience to come there, you're not going to see a lot of engagement on a paid distribution strategy. And so I think if you're really looking on a limited budget for like where to go, is like look for the right fit and the right authentic place for your brand, and then look at how much organic distribution they can really garner for you, because again, we're in a world where anybody can buy the views.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too. I was on a call, a presentation the other day with the local media association and ONA, and I think for a lot of new brands that are launching too, is if you have enough money to be able to go to Barstools or Overtimes or Disney's, I'm sure that they would welcome your business and you should give them a call. But there's a lot of other folks that you can look at in the media world, right? So I think we should think about the whole landscape if you are trying to partner with some of these groups, and sports are a target audience, right? So there are a lot of local and regional media companies that all have really great sports departments that are covering and creating content. So think about the different types of audiences and the people that you want to reach. And don't forget that there are media companies of all shapes and sizes, not just all the big folks that we have here today. I think we had another good question. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and just following up on this, Deirdre, and maybe everyone has a broader comment on this, but you mentioned the paid side of things. And so someone was talking about organic views versus paid promotional views. How much paid are you building into these branded campaigns? If anything, I guess this is a broader conversation for everyone, but like when you're building these campaigns, how much of it are you allocating from a dollars and cents standpoint to amplifying and putting paid promotion behind the organic posts as well?
Not much.
Yeah, not much. I would say, I don't know, Deirdre, if you guys do it, but I think the only requirement where we would leverage paid social is if we had an adult beverage brand that had to reach 21 plus. That's a very difficult thing to do organically, especially when you're reaching 130 million people on a monthly basis with 55 million followers. So I think paid social can be misperceived as being something that's like creating fat or padding, when the reality, it actually introduces an element of structure that can be really beneficial. Again, that's not something that we do at Overtime, but I understand that it's part of the business, and there are reasons why you want to use that.
Yeah, and I think there's probably instances where we are using it to deliver on a number that we promised, but we're trying to get as much of the distribution organically as we can for our brand partners, because again, we want to reach people. It's not about how many impressions did I sell you, how many views are on the plan. It's are we engaging the fans with your brand? And so, we try to build our distribution for any campaign or partnership around, what we've historically been able to drive in terms of organic viewership. It's not a perfect science. So, we have all the tools at our disposal. We use a lot of paid social to market our own products too. So there's, we know the value, we know what works and what doesn't work. So fortunately for us, we're as big of an advertiser out there as anyone, pushing, all of the Barstool merch and products from our store. So we lean into the knowledge that we garner there to potentially enhance a campaign. But again, we start really with primarily organic distribution.
It's similar at Disney. We'll look at a campaign and what we're trying to achieve, and we determine very much then what we need to do to hit on the KPIs that have been defined. So is that organic sometimes, and we, specifically stay in that space? Yes. And then there's times where we have to hit a certain audience, to Rich's point, where we may bring in paid as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to Christina on our end. Certainly have a ton of organic distribution. Paid is a really important element for us, just because we have partners in so many different industries. So typically, when we're targeting a fan base of a school, we want to layer on targeting for interest in that industry as well, just so we know that we're segmenting that larger audience a little bit, and we're hitting the people who might convert, might be a potential customer for our partner in the future. So we actually on most of our social assets, we have a big impression goal, and that's kind of our starting point on the paid side. And really, we're setting these things up again, going back to the KPIs. Like, we're setting these things up. Everything's surrounded by that KPI. So, for an example, if we're trying to generate leads for a partner, we're setting up a super concise call to action. We're using the headline feature in Facebook and Instagram to really call that action. Certainly using, quality creative to stop the thumb. But everything else is really honed around getting that lead, getting that, video view or whatever the main KPI is. So paid for us is a pretty big piece. It's not the end all be all. Certainly we do have really good distribution organically, but paid's kind of that additional, hyper focused thing that we can add on to ensure campaign performance.
Awesome. So we have about 15 minutes or so left. If anyone else has any other questions, we'll try and get to a few of them. I think we want to talk about the future, right? And some branded content strategy. And I'd love to talk. I know, Rich, you've already talked about TikTok. Deirdre, you mentioned TikTok. I would probably say, everyone probably interested on emerging platforms. Maybe go around the horn quickly and talking about how you're leveraging emerging platforms, what's working best for you. Maybe even Rich, I know you use the example, Dick's coming to you to say, how do we even use TikTok, right? So I think one of the things here before we jump into more UGC questions from the audience, would love to just go around emerging platforms and talk about how you guys are leveraging them, what you're seeing the most successful is, and from a campaign perspective, maybe highlighting one of those. So I guess I'll just start with Rich, and we can go around the horn.
Yeah, we obviously do a ton with TikTok. I mean, when you have that large of community on a platform like TikTok that's growing at the rate by which it's growing, hitting over 100 million Americans at present. I mean, it's a growth engine for our business and for the advertising business broadly. I think what is different, a little bit different about TikTok versus maybe the content we're creating for YouTube or Instagram audiences is that the TikTok strategy is really influencer led. So at the point that we move from being on YouTube to expressing ourselves as a brand on TikTok, we've moved from a publisher to an influencer. And a lot of people don't think of Overtime as an influencer, but that's really what we are. In the same way Dave Portnoy is an influencer on behalf of Barstool, Overtime as an entity is an influencer. And as such, when we show up on TikTok, we have to think and operate and act the way an influencer would act. Even if it's one of the members of our talent representing Overtime in that environment, it's got to be influencer led, because that's what drives TikTok engagement. It's a different value proposition. Some brands embrace that risk, other brands reject that risk. But what I would say is if you're a major brand that's keen on reaching 18 to 34-year-olds and you don't have a TikTok strategy well-defined and baked out, and it's amazing how many major brands do not, you're missing a tremendous growth opportunity. And for the publisher side, I would just say you've got to put your biggest and brightest faces forward. I mean, not all of us are blessed with a Dave Portnoy, but you don't have to have Dave, right? You can have smaller versions of Dave. You can have, different genders and different representation and still accomplish the same goal. And I think that's the power of TikTok. And quite frankly, just the whole notion of it being fun and entertaining creates a huge swim lane and a huge opportunity both for content creators like Overtime and brands like Dick's Sporting Goods. And when those two initiatives meet in the middle on TikTok, great things happen. So I don't really think of TikTok as an emerging platform anymore, the way maybe I think about Clubhouse being an emerging platform, but it is part and parcel to our success and certainly part of our growth trajectory.
It's got to be fun making TikToks for Dick's. I can imagine just all the different ways. We've talked about Walmart in the past and how they've used product demonstration videos and employees with a lot of success. So I can only imagine what fun stuff you guys are able to cook up.
Yeah, but the problem for Walmart is Walmart has 500,000 followers. We have 18 million. So when they did
Right.
their holiday shoptacular, and they were leveraging influencers trying to sell product, that's great. Except they don't have the connective tissue of the community, and that's what you really have to have. Like, we're not the beach, but we're a campfire on the beach, and it's just a different mentality. And I think that's the way we can leverage TikTok. And quite frankly, ESPN does, Barstool. I mean, everybody can. It's not a exclusive opportunity to overtime. It's available to everybody, which is great.
So I would echo everything that Rich just said about TikTok, and we're very big in that space as well. But to give some other perspective, one of the huge areas of growth that we've seen is in the podcasting space. I mean, we're well known as one of the top podcasting networks. ESPN's right there with us. But that's long been a primarily audio medium that's been booming. And we've always looked at a podcast as a franchise that has a 360 kind of like the audio piece and distribution as a spoke in the wheel, right? They have social highlights, they have a merch merch outlet, they have a lot of times experiential and sometimes other video series that are born out of that podcast. But what's been interesting this year, and I do think the pandemic had a lot to do with it, is the shift of consumption of podcasts from the audio only distribution to the video version of that same show has been huge for us. And in fact, shows that we've launched recently have more distribution on YouTube today than they actually do in audio. So we still record it and put it out, on all the different audio platforms where people consume podcasts, Apple, Spotify, et cetera. But, we're now filming that show, putting it and producing it and putting it out on video on Barstool as well as our YouTube channels. And we're layering a visual component into that for the advertiser that is making the show exponentially more valuable to that advertiser. Now they have that sight, sound, and motion that they get from TV and other visual mediums. They have a clickable link in the description so they can actually track people transacting or moving from that show to wherever they're trying to drive consumers. That's been a big shift for us and something that I think will only continue. In the audio space, while it's been booming, I think it's funny how to see it shift back to video.
So I'll go, and what Rich and Deirdre said is spot on for ESPN. We're activating TikTok space and really still figuring out how to best be in that space. So whether it's influencers and how we bring brands, we're really experimenting in that space, ad products that we're starting to work within, like Twitter Spaces. But also, addition to that, is we're working even more closely with our talent and really figuring out how we can leverage their social handles for distribution and what does that look like and what they're comfortable with and what that content will really be. So that's also another area that we're going into.
Yeah, same goes with Learfield IMG. We are, certainly exploring how we can monetize the TikTok platform. And one of the things that I think is unique for us is, we work in college. So we work in, on campus in college towns, which is, the people who are producing that content. So one of the things we're working on as a broader influencer strategy is how do we tap into the college student on campus who happens to have a large following on TikTok, produces some cool content? How do we leverage that piece in our broader influencer strategy? So that's definitely something at the top of our list. And then another one, I know this isn't a kind of emerging platform, but we've seen some really good success this past year in Snapchat. And not only ad placement, but we've really dug into AR functionality. And creating custom lenses for partners, creating calls to actions through to their website or through a lead generation form to generate posts or campaign leads. So those are just a few places we're exploring, and obviously always looking for the next thing.
Awesome. Super helpful and super engaging from an answer standpoint. So obviously we have about 8-9 minutes left. So we're going to try and get to a couple more of these questions here. With NIL around the corner, we did have someone ask about that. I know we were chatting a little bit about it earlier, but with NIL about to take effect, they said they're curious about how companies like IMG, Learfield, Overtime, Barstool, ESPN are approaching this new opportunities for brands or partners seeking ways to incorporate their asset/branding content with individual athletes / influence either directly or indirectly. I know there's a lot of things up in the air from an NIL perspective, so probably some things legally you can say and some things legally you cannot, but anyone who wants to jump in there and address that, given that in some states it'll be legal in 2 days.
Listen, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, Adam, you made a great point. A lot of the legality is still TBD. That said, we're positioning ourselves to take, to have some part in this. How big or small it is kind of to be determined. But really working on, a platform, an influencer platform that we could potentially leverage with NIL. Again, it's a little bit too early to speak into any specifics on it because there is so much up in the air, but definitely something we've been working on, trying to position, trying to find our best footing in terms of position, really since I think the first federal legislation was announced less than a year ago. So that's really where we started digging in and figuring out, okay, we've got direct relationships with the schools. We have multimedia rights to school marks. And then, we've got a relationship with an influencer platform that, could potentially all tie together into something. What that is yet is to be determined, but definitely an interesting space and something we're excited for.
Yeah, I mean, drafting off what Zach said, with 7 states having legislation that starts on July 1st, 21 other states already approving it, the NCAA coming out with a revised policy yesterday, I'm jumping up and down, not because of what it means for overtime, but what it means for athletes and their ability to control their own destiny and be rewarded economically for the time they've invested in pursuing excellence. It's an asymmetric opportunity for all publishers. I think uniquely for overtime, it creates a different opportunity because we've been doing this for a while. We're a global brand. We have relationships with athletes overseas that are 16, 17, and 18 years old, include them in branded content or sponsored content. And now we can uncover that opportunity for 3,500 men and women that are playing Division I basketball, another, let's see, almost 5,000 athletes playing Division I football. I mean, there's this massive opportunity to leverage all the power of the 17 million followers on ESPN's TikTok handle or 13 million on Barstool. Imagine what some combination of Barstool, ESPN, and Overtime can do for a brand leveraging college athletes. And, because we believe this was coming fast and furiously, that's why we launched Overtime Elite and created the first professional basketball league for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, where they'll all be compensated. They'll all have equity in our business at Overtime. They'll all be given loss of income insurance, and they'll all be given a college scholarship if they choose not to pursue a professional path. And that is a sea change. And what I would say is the combination of what we're doing around Overtime Elite and the revision of name, image, and likeness, these are probably some of the biggest things that have happened in sports since 1992, when the Dream Team allowed NBA athletes to pursue their Olympic dream. And this is a moment in time that we're never going to forget. And I think it's going to be absolutely monumental. It's going to be great for the athletes. It's going to be great for influencer brands like Overtime and for everybody in publishing along the way. I think this is one of those weird situations where everybody wins and nobody loses.
That's great.
Anyone else have anything to add to that?
I would say, from our perspective right now, really we're just celebrants of the situation and have been pretty vocal on it, both our CEO and our founder, Dave and Erica. In particular, recently, this was an interesting case where the NCAA actually canceled the women's golf championship or the semifinals because of the rain that was happening in Louisiana at the time and the status of the course not being up to par to play what they felt was championship level match. So they just advanced to the top teams to the finals, and the other girls were literally standing in tears watching the announcement that they weren't going to get to play, some of them ever again, college golf. We turned around, put on a tournament, which we called the Let Them Play tournament, and a week later flew all those girls to Arizona and let them play in their last golf match. And we had about 10 brands come to us, or people we were already currently working with around our golf business, to come and help us fund that initiative and support those young ladies. And to me, it signaled this is going to be a big opportunity to Rich's point, a lot of different brands, but primarily for the athletes. The brands really wanted to get behind the girls. They also were really careful about, hey, we can't gift them anything. We can't sponsor them. We really just want to give you guys what you need resource-wise in order to put this event on for them and support them in any way we can. So I think that brands are going to get behind athletes in a major way, and it's up to entities and brands like us, everyone here on this call, to come up with the ways in which we can, amplify that, create those opportunities, make them bigger than just the individual athletes themselves. I don't think that the big opportunity in the day, and to Rich's point about Overtime Elite, like it's the individuals themselves could easily go become kind of micro influencers. But if you can bring them all together in a meaningful way and create a platform, that is when you'll get the full support of sponsors and advertisers.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're just at time, unless Nick, you have anything else on your end. I think that's pretty much an excellent way to end, kind of a forward-looking opportunity, but anything you want to add quickly before we run out of time?
No, I'm just I'm so thrilled that we were able to bring all of you guys together. Thank you so much for participating. I mean, there's billions of dollars in revenue right here in these 4 boxes alone, and I'm super excited to be able to just take some nuggets of wisdom from all of you. And then for everybody who joined, I really appreciate you guys tuning in as well. So if anybody's interested in connecting more on analytics and measurement, as some of the folks mentioned today, we'd be happy to give you a walkthrough of the social insights at Conviva platform, and feel free to connect with us and we can set that up. So thank you so much. And thank you to you, Adam, for hosting the great session.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again. I'll echo Nick's sentiment. Thanks again for everyone joining us. Obviously, it's a very busy time for everyone, kind of end of the quarter, charging into what was already the 4th of July holiday, which seems so crazy, but really appreciate everyone joining, everyone who jumped in on the conversation. If you want to go back and listen to it, everything will be sent to you within, by the end of the day. So the whole conversation. So if there's anything you want to take away, but again, really appreciate Deidre, Rich, Zach, Christina, and Nick for joining us. And hopefully everyone has a great rest of their week, and then hopefully a good long weekend, but really appreciate it, everyone.
Take care.
See you guys. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, Zach.
Bye.
See you, Deirdre.